traveling can break their fast. Then we looked at the next verse, and we mentioned a similar thing, that Allah Ta'ala says that He wants ease for us and doesn't want hardship. And the final verse was one that encourages us to supplicate and make dua. Remember, we said that Allah mentioned certain verses which mention rulings, then in the middle, more of a spiritual reminder, a reminder of this connection between us and Allah Ta'ala. And that goes back to discussing rulings. And this is the beauty of studying the Quran. Quran is encompassing. It doesn't just talk about the law. This is allowed, this is not allowed, this is haram, this is halal, this is compulsory, etc. It actually teaches us how to ethically behave, how to be with our relationship with Allah Ta'ala, etc. Allah then says, أُحِلَّ لَكُمْ, and this is today's verse. It has been permitted for you, لَيْلَةَ الصِّيَامِ, on the night of fasting, الرَّفَثُ إِلَى نِسَائِكُمْ, to come on to your wives, meaning to have relations with your wives. هُنَّ لِبَاسٌ لَكُمْ وَأَنْتُمْ لِبَاسٌ لَهُمْ, they are a raiment for you, and you are a raiment for them. It's a raiment. Yeah, it's a covering, a garment, a covering. This term raiment was previously obviously used in the English language. Now it's not so often used, but nonetheless it refers to a covering and a clothing and a garment. So Allah says here in the Quran, your wives are a garment, are a covering for you, and you are a covering for them. And what do we think that indicates? What's that suggesting in this verse? That's indicating that closeness that exists between husband and wife. Just as the closeness of one of us with our clothes are stuck to us, as well as that we and our clothes, we don't separate between a person and their clothes. So he's come up, he's sat over there with his clothes. Just he's sat over there. The fact that he's wearing clothes or not, that's part of the person. And a lot of the scholars of tafsir, including Mujahid, and it's reported from Ibn Abbas and others as well, Sa'id ibn Jubayr, say, هُنَّ لِبَاسٌ لَكُمْ, they are a raiment for you, meaning they are a reason for tranquility between you. There's something that you find a home within. There's something that you find comfort within. And so Allah Ta'ala is almost saying that it would be too much of a burden for you to not be allowed to have relations with your spouses for the whole month, when they are so close to you, when there is such a powerful and strong relationship between you. Then Allah Ta'ala says, عَلِمَ اللَّهُ أَنَّكُمْ كُنْتُمْ تَخْتَانُونَ أَنفُسَكُمْ فَتَابَ عَلَيْكُمْ. Allah knew that you used to betray yourselves. فَتَابَ عَلَيْكُمْ وَعَفَى عَنْكُمْ. So He forgave you and pardoned you, or He relented towards you and He pardoned you. But previously, before the rulings that we know of fasting today, does anyone know when a person would have to stop eating and drinking and having relations? So it's still from Fajr to Maghrib, but there was an additional ruling in place. That additional ruling was that if you slept before Fajr, you would have to keep your fast after that. So if you slept any time between Maghrib and Fajr, you would have to keep your fast for the whole of the next day. So that means, let's say, the adhan of Maghrib was made, you had a sip of water and then fell asleep. That's it. You would keep your fast now for the rest of the day. And that was, of course, a burden for a lot of the companions. And this is why it's reported that Qais ibn Sirma, al-Ansari radiallahu anhu, once he returned home after being outside fasting during Ramadan, and he said to his wife, "Do we have any food?" She said, no, we haven't got anything, but let me just pop outside and go and find something. So as she left to go and find something, he remained, and he fell asleep. He fell asleep. And when she returned and found him asleep, she said, oh dear, this is a problem. So he kept his fast for the next day. And during that fast of the next day, he fell unconscious because it was too much of a burden. So Allah Ta'ala abrogated that ruling. And we find this sometimes in the rulings of Islam, that initially a ruling is more strict to begin with, and then Allah lessens the burden. That is to show that Allah Ta'ala, if He wished, if He willed, He's our Creator, He's our Lord, and we're His servants. If He willed and wanted to make things more burdensome for us, then we have no right to say no, because we're His servants. So Allah Ta'ala is reminding us that if Allah wanted to, He could have done X, Y, Z, He could have required this from you, but instead Allah has lessened the burden upon you. And this is why Allah says in the other verse in Surah Al-Baqarah, وَلَوْ شَاءَ اللَّهُ لَأَعْنَتَكُمْ. If Allah wanted to, He would have burdened you. He would have overburdened you. But instead He reduced the burden. Similar to the concept of prayers, we all know that the prayers were legislated 50 prayers a day initially. Allah Ta'ala knows that 5 prayers is what's going to be compulsory. It's not like Allah Ta'ala changed His mind. He thought it was going to be 50 prayers and then changed His mind and thought, actually, let's just keep it 5 prayers. He knew. But again, it's an indication that Allah wants ease for us. And that goes back to the previous verse that we looked at. God wants ease for you and He doesn't want hardship. So, this concept of our spouses being a raiment for us, or a covering for us, is important. Because it indicates that this is one of the objectives of marriage. That people find comfort. People find comfort. And this is why it's necessary for husbands to make their wives comfortable, and for wives to make their husbands comfortable, so that this objective is achieved. Not to compete to make things as difficult as possible for one another, which can sometimes happen, especially if people fall out, or if there are disputes or things like that. That people want to make things as difficult as possible for the other person without any reason, without gaining any benefit from that. And that's of course contradictory to the objective of marriage. Now, Allah Ta'ala has permitted during the night, the whole night, okay, from Maghrib until Fajr, for spouses to have relations with each other and to eat and to drink, as we'll come to see later, during the whole night, whether a person sleeps during the night or doesn't sleep, or whether a person, whatever the case is. And this is a blessing, because like we said, if it was something that people had to abstain from for a whole month, that would have been a big burden. Allah Ta'ala then says, فَالْآنَ بَاشِرُوهُنَّ. So now, come on to them, have relations with them, وَابْتَغُوا مَا كَتَبَ اللَّهُ لَكُمْ, and seek that which God has decreed for you. Most scholars of tafsir say, seek a righteous child through your relations. Seek a child, seek children. And that's definitely one of the objectives of intercourse, one of the objectives of relations, but it's not restricted to that. And this is why we don't say that relations is the only, or relations is only there for the sake of having children. That's not correct. That's not correct. Physical relations are there for much more than just having children. They're a comfort. They're a cause of relaxation. It's a cause of relaxation and tranquility. It's a cause of bringing the spouses closer to one another. It's a reason to keep a person away from haram, from things that are sinful. Okay? So these are all... And pleasure. Is pleasure wrong? Just because something is pleasurable or enjoyable, does that make it wrong, or something that is not holy? That's an incorrect way of looking at things. Absolutely not. And we've said it a number of times. We've said that Islam doesn't come to encourage things that are beyond, that's beyond human ability, beyond human nature. To say you shouldn't be intending pleasure with intercourse. So what else is a person going to intend? In fact, if that pleasure wasn't there, then people wouldn't be finding themselves, having relations like this. During the night, everything's permitted. Between husband and wife, everything's permitted. During the day, everything's also permitted, except one thing, and that is intercourse. And that's why Aisha radiallahu anha reports that the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says, قالت كان يقبل ويباشر وهو صائم. He would, the qubla is the kiss, and the mubashara is touching. وهو صائم, whilst he was fasting. And she said, وَكَانَ أَمْلَكُكُمْ لِإِرْبِهِ. But he was most capable of controlling himself or disciplining himself. And that's why if a person is comfortable that they are not going to fall into one of the invalidators of fasting, then there's no harm in contact or fondling or things like that with one's spouse. That's on the condition, of course, that they're comfortable, confident that they're not going to be led into anything problematic. And that's a decision every person makes for themselves. Many scholars discourage those who are young from doing so in the first place. They say those who are young shouldn't go near touching or fondling or kissing or anything like that at all. Because those who are young tend to be quicker to take things from one step to the next. That's, in the few seconds that I had, that's the best way I could have put it. So because of that, many of the scholars discourage that those who are young do so. Discourage, it doesn't mean it's haram, but it's discouraged. Simply because anything which is done to stop you from falling into something haram should be done. Yeah.
So what happens if you have a relation overnight and you fall asleep into the morning and you've woken up in the state of najasa?
No. Jamil, طبعا we don't call it najasa. We call it hadath, because najasa indicates impurity. And the Prophet ﷺ says, إِنَّ الْمُؤْمِنَ لَا يَنْجُسْ, and the hadith is in the Sahihain. The believer never becomes najis, impure. And so regardless of the state that a person's in, they're never najis. They're never considered impure. But they're considered to be in a state of spiritual, I guess you could say, spiritual impurity, or you could say that the Arabic is hadath. Yeah? As the Prophet ﷺ says, إِذَا أَحْدَثَ حَتَّى يَتَوَضَّأَ. So, if a person has relations during the night, and then they fall asleep, and the adhan of Fajr has come in, does that have an impact on their fast? No. It doesn't have an impact. In fact, and you've asked it, but we were going to come on to it anyway, because it's the next part that relates to the verse. Imam Malik rahimahullah and Muhammad ibn Hassan al-Shaybani and other scholars of fiqh from the early generations used this verse to prove that there is no harm in a person waking up in sexual impurity and fasting. It doesn't impact their fast. Why? Because they haven't committed any of the invalidators of fasting. They haven't committed any of the invalidators of fasting. So therefore there's no issue. In fact, somebody came to the Prophet ﷺ, or to the wives of the Prophet ﷺ to begin with, and asked about this exact issue. What if someone wakes up after Fajr in a state of janaba? Janaba is major impurity after relations, meaning they need to make a ghusl, they need to have a bath. So Aisha, and another hadith, Salama as well, said, yeah, the Prophet ﷺ would do that, and he'd wake up and fast. So he said, the person who went to ask the question, he said that nobody's like the Prophet ﷺ. Nobody's like the Prophet. Allah makes some things permissible for the Prophet, but He doesn't make them permissible for us. So Allah Ta'ala, so the Prophet ﷺ got extremely upset when he heard that. Got extremely upset and said, by Allah, I hope that there is nobody who is more aware and more conscious of Allah, and nobody more knowledgeable of the limits of Allah. That's the truth, because Allah is the one who's taught him. He's the guide, he's the teacher. So no doubt he's going to be the most knowledgeable of Allah's limits. And that teaches us something. That teaches us that if the Prophet ﷺ does something, then necessarily that thing is permissible. Necessarily. If the Messenger does something, that thing is permissible. Unless we have an explicit proof to prove otherwise. If we have a clear proof to prove that this thing is only for the Messenger, then that's another issue. If we don't have that explicit proof, then we say it's permissible for the Muslims. And this hadith indicates that we've just mentioned. The Messenger ﷺ being upset when people made such statements and said, yeah, but that's the Prophet. Of course, he's the guide. So if the Prophet, why did the wives of the Messenger ﷺ tell these people, the Messenger did that and he would fast? To say, follow his way, follow his sunnah. So therefore, waking up after Fajr in a state of janaba doesn't impact the fast at all. Similarly, if a person has a wet dream during the night and then wakes up after Fajr and they haven't performed ghusl before Fajr, we say the fast is also valid and it doesn't have impact the fast at all. In fact, having a wet dream doesn't impact the fast in any way, even if it occurs during the day. Yeah? Having a wet dream doesn't impact the fast, even if it occurs during the day. Why? Because it's beyond the person's control. It's beyond the person's control, and it's not an intentional omitting of many. Okay. Allah Ta'ala says here in this verse, as we mentioned, فَتَابَ عَلَيْكُمْ وَعَفَى عَنْكُمْ. Allah knew that some of you betrayed themselves. Some of you betrayed themselves. This is a reference to what's reported in some narrations, that some of the companions returned back home during the night, and he wanted to have relations with his spouse, with his wife, but he found his wife sleeping. And remember, we said at that time that if a person sleeps at any time during the night, then they have to keep their fast until the next day. So when she saw that that's what he wanted, she said, I slept. He said, no, he didn't sleep. He said he didn't sleep. He just had a bit of a rest. So after that, he returned to the Prophet ﷺ and sort of maybe upset at what he did. And Allah Ta'ala revealed these verses, saying, Allah knew that some of you betrayed themselves. فَالْآنَ بَاشِرُهُمْ. So now have relations during the night and do what you wish during the night.
So this is the obligation. When was this revealed?
When was what revealed?
This particular verse.
This particular verse? In relation to what?
The obligation of the previous rule.
It was revealed after it. It was definitely revealed after it. When exactly it was revealed, I don't know. In terms of the Hijri calendar or the Hijri year, I don't know when exactly it was revealed. But it was revealed after these incidents. And in fact, there are hadith which indicate that. Hadith which indicate that Allah revealed these verses because of these incidents, to reduce that burden. So that's what it's a reference to. So he said to him, no, you're not gonna, just because you slept. So he convinced her that she didn't fall asleep. And it seemed like she either was convinced or she just went with the flow. And Allah Ta'ala then after that, the issue of pardoning and forgiveness. See, this is why at the beginning, in the first lecture, I mentioned that every verse or every hadith, you will find it goes back to a verse. So whenever studying the Quran or studying a hadith, try to find which verse does this hadith go back to. And this is an excellent way of learning. It really is. Because it convinces you and teaches you that the Quran and the words of the Prophet ﷺ are not to be detached from one another. They go hand in hand. They go hand in hand. When Allah says in this verse, Allah has pardoned you and forgiven you. The Messenger ﷺ says in the famous hadith, "Man akala aw shariba wa huwa sa'imun falyatimma sawmahu." Whoever eats or drinks whilst fasting, whoever eats or drinks forgetfully, man nasiya وهو صائم فأكل وشرب فليتم صومه فإنما أطعمه الله وسقاه, because it is Allah who has fed him. Meaning, if you accidentally eat during your fast, or accidentally drink during your fast remains valid. Your fast remains valid. And you continue your fast, but obviously you have to stop eating or drinking the moment you remember. And this typically might happen in the first few days when you're not in fasting routine yet. You're still not in fasting mode, so it happens in the first 2 or 3 days of Ramadan. Until afterwards we get used to it, and in fact even on the day of Eid we might feel like we shouldn't eat or drink, and it might feel strange to eat or drink during Eid because we're so used to fasting for a whole month. So if during the fasting we accidentally eat or we accidentally drink, we say the fast is correct, no problem, on the condition that you stop eating or drinking immediately. You can't continue the meal, okay, and say, well, I started off forgetfully. You started off forgetfully, but now the excuse is gone. It's the moment you remember, there's no longer an excuse. Now, Allah Ta'ala then says, وَكُلُوا وَاشْرَبُوا, and eat and drink. حَتَّى يَتَبَيَّنَ لَكُمْ الْخَيْطُ الْأَبْيَضُ مِنَ الْخَيْطِ الْأَسْوَدِ مِنَ الْفَجْرِ. Eat and drink. In another verse, Allah Ta'ala says, وَكُلُوا وَاشْرَبُوا وَلَا تُسْرِفُوا إِنَّهُ لَا يُحِبُّ الْمُسْرِفِينَ. And eat and drink, but do not be excessive. This isn't talking about fasting, it's just a general verse. This verse is talking about fasting, but the verse now I'm referring to isn't talking about fasting, it's just a general verse. Allah says in it, and eat and drink, and do not be excessive. وَلَا تُسْرِفُوا. Allah doesn't like those who are excessive and extreme. What's excessive? We have a hadith that explains this verse for us. What's that hadith? What's considered excessive eating or excessive drinking?
Wasteful.
But what is that? What's wasteful?
Getting too much, more than you can consume.
More than your need.
More than a need. Okay. So the moment you feel that there's no more need, you have to stop eating or drinking.
Consume physically.
You physically can't consume more. Then you definitely have to stop. But surely there's a level which is slightly before that. Yeah. We're aware of the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. مَا مَلَأَ آدَمِيٌّ وِعَاءً شَرًّا مِنْ بَطْنٍ. There is no vessel that the son of Adam can fill that is worse than the stomach. Meaning the worst thing that we can fill is the stomach. بِحَسْبِ ابْنِ آدَمَ أُكُلَاتٍ يُقِمْنَ صُلْبَهُ. It's enough for the son of Adam to have a few bites, ukulat. Yuqimna sulbah, to keep his back straight, to keep himself going. That's sufficient. So now we have a recommended amount to eat. If we made that the compulsory amount to eat, then we're stuck, because most of us eat much more than that. But this is a recommended amount. Eat that which a few bites that make it sufficient for you to go about your day. Don't go back hungry. But it doesn't mean that we're either hungry or we're full to the max. But have a few bites that keep you going. Then the Prophet ﷺ says, فَإِنْ كَانَ لَا مَحَالًا. If you really have to, which is the case for us, if you really have to go beyond that, فَثُلُثٌ لِطَعَامِهِ. Then a third for one's food, وَثُلُثٌ لِشَرَابِهِ وَثُلُثٌ لِنَفَسِهِ. Then a third for food, and a third for your drink, and a third for breathing. So when you say you eat till the maximum, till you can't take more, that's too much, because now we've filled that extra third which is supposed to be empty. Obviously this is an estimate. There's no way you're going to be exact on knowing what a third of food and a third of drink is. But the point is, the Prophet ﷺ is giving us a guideline, telling us, do not eat till you're filled. Do not eat until you're completely filled, and you have no space to move or to breathe, etc. That's excessive. That's over the top. And so therefore, when we read the statement of Allah Ta'ala, eat and drink, and do not be excessive, do not overeat, do not overdrink, we have prophetic guideline. We have a prophetic guideline on what excessive eating and drinking is. What's the recommended amount of eating and drinking? Just a few bites to keep us going. Is Ramadan an exception to the rule, or is Ramadan the same? The same. The same. This rule applies in Ramadan as well as it applies outside of Ramadan. However, naturally, and psychologically we feel like, no, I need to eat, I've not been eating all day, I need to eat as much as possible. Then we say, fine, but it needs to be within the guideline of a third. So you eat and drink, but do not exceed the amount so much that you struggle to breathe, or you struggle to stand, or you struggle to eat in anymore. And that's an important indication, because sometimes we take Ramadan and it's food festival. Right? SubhanAllah. It's the month of not eating and drinking, and we've turned it into a food festival. How can that be? Eid, if Eid was a food festival, say, okay, it's Eid. It's a different story. But the month of fasting from food and drink to be turned into a food festival, surely that's a problem. And this is why some non-Muslims, surely they must be confused when they take part in Ramadan activities. On the one hand, they're told, this is a month where we don't eat and drink. Oh, you guys don't eat and drink for a whole month. And on the other hand, they come and all they see is food. Everything's about food. Every invitation is food, and iftar is filled with food, and tarawih is filled with food, and so that's problematic. So it's important to get ourselves into that mind of, I'm not going to overeat during Ramadan. I'm not going to overeat. And in reality, it's just a psychological game. We think that we need to eat and eat and eat. If we have a few bites and go for tarawih, I assure you, we're not going to have a problem. It's not like we're going to collapse during tarawih because we've eaten too little. I guarantee you that's not going to be the case. Having a few bites that are sufficient, in fact, stops us from going dizzy, stops us from not being able to pray properly, stops us from losing concentration and focus. That's why this sunnah, when the Prophet ﷺ encourages us to eat a certain amount and not overeat, that's for our benefit. It's for our benefit. Overeating only brings harms. Overeating brings harms. طيب وكلوا واشربوا, and eat and drink حتى يتبين لكم الخيط الأبيض من الخيط الأسود من الفجر, until the night becomes clear from the day. And the literal translation, حتى يتبين الخيط الأبيض من الخيط الأسود, until the black thread becomes clear or distinguished from the white thread of the night, of Fajr. Meaning, until Fajr becomes clear. Until dawn becomes clear. When dawn becomes clear, يتبين. يتبين indicates what? It becomes clear. What's bayan? In Urdu you say bayan. What's bayan? Speech. Speech is there to do what? To clarify something. To make something clear. So similarly, eat and drink until Fajr becomes clear. And that gives us a ruling. And that ruling is that we're allowed to continue eating and drinking and doing anything else which breaks the fast until Fajr becomes clear. We don't have to stop eating or drinking based on doubt. Of course, now we typically use timetables. And so we sort of rely upon that. But let's say that you ate and you drank. Fajr is at 4 o'clock. And you were eating and drinking, and then a few minutes after you finished eating and drinking, you found that it's 2 minutes past 4, 3 minutes past 4. And you think, was I eating after 4 or before 4? I'm not sure. What do we say? Say your fast is valid. Why is your fast valid? Because you only have to stop eating and drinking when you're clear, when you're certain. Those who don't use timetables, as it historically was the case, then to them, so long as they don't clearly see Fajr outside, they continue eating and drinking without any problem. Then Allah Ta'ala says, ثُمَّ أَتِمُّ الصِّيَامَ إِلَى اللَّيْلِ, then continue your fast till the night. The night is Maghrib, sunset. The night is Maghrib. This verse shows us that your fast cannot be valid unless you fast from Fajr to Maghrib. Fajr to Maghrib. This verse is explicit. Allah Ta'ala says, وَكُلُوا وَاشْرَبُوا حَتَّى يَتَبَيَّنَ لَكُمُ الْخَيْطُ الْأَبْيَضُ مِنَ الْخَيْطِ الْأَسْوَدِ مِنَ الْفَجْرِ. Eat and drink until Fajr becomes clear. ثُمَّ أَتِمُّ الصِّيَامَ إِلَى اللَّيْلِ. Then continue your fast until the night. Is it any clearer than that? And therefore, the one who says, as some people have said, that you can start fasting at sunrise, we say that's a problem, because it contradicts this verse. Or the one who says you can fast 18 hours, and you don't have to fast more than 18 hours, because more than 18 hours is a burden. We say Allah Ta'ala tells us to fast until the night. So long as your country, the place that you're living in, has day and night, then you need to continue until the night. Even worse is the opinion that says you can fast with the timing of Mecca. Timing of Mecca. When it's Maghrib in Mecca, you can break your fast in Birmingham. What's Birmingham got to do with Mecca? Got nothing to do with Mecca. Those in Mecca break their fast when it's Maghrib in Mecca. Those in Birmingham break their fast when it's Maghrib in Birmingham. And so that's a very problematic opinion. As you can see, contradictory to this verse. Because so long as we're concerned, Maghrib hasn't come yet. It's not night. Eat and drink when I can see the sun. The sun is soaring above me, and I eat and drink. It's highly problematic. If someone says, yeah, but it's hard, you've got to fast for 20 hours, 21 hours, say, okay, fast for as long as you can. If you find that it's too much for you to fast, you're about to faint, you're struggling to fast, you're incapable of keeping the fast at all, then break. Allah has given you an excuse if you're ill. Those who are ill have been given an excuse. Break your fast. We're not saying fast even if you fall unconscious. Fast even if you're about to die. No. But there are rules in place. As well as that, those countries that have inconsistent day lengths, like us in the UK, even worse in Scandinavian countries. We have it difficult during the summer, but in the winter we have it easy. In the winter we have it easy. In the winter we might be fasting from 7 o'clock in the morning till 3:30. You break your fast while still at work. You haven't even thought that you're fasting because you've been so busy with work or studying, and you realise, oh, I need to break my fast. During the winter, this happens a lot. You realise, I need to break my fast. It's like the Maghrib's come too quick. I need more time. In the summer, it's the other way around. You're sitting there waiting for the time. Where's Maghrib going to come? Where's Maghrib going to come? Where's Maghrib going to come? Make dua, Maghrib comes. So, as one of our mashayikh says, he says, you guys want it easy in the summer and you want it easy in the winter? That's how it is. In those countries, times are consistent. Times are more consistent. So day lengths are relatively similar. So okay, they don't have to fast as long as we fast, but at the same time they don't get to fast as short as we fast. And as we said, at the end of the day, the point is, Allah Ta'ala has laid down the method of fasting. He's taught us how to fast. From Fajr till Maghrib. That's the rule. If you have Fajr and Maghrib in your country, you fast. You fast during the day. And you have to continue fasting until sunset, until the night appears. If you find there is too much of a hardship, you fear for yourself, you find that physically your body isn't able to take, we say now break your fast and you can make it up after Ramadan.
So what are these Scandinavian countries having to do then?
Scandinavian countries, the ruling doesn't change. If during the month of Ramadan there is a concept of Fajr and Maghrib, they fast all the way from Fajr to Maghrib. And a lot of the brothers, and I'm in Sweden tomorrow, inshallah, and a lot of these brothers, inshallah ta'ala. ماشي السوق؟
أنا سمعت أكثر من
21 سنة. كيف وجدته؟ And he's saying that he's fasted more than 21 hours. وين هذه؟ Sweden or Sweden? Sweden.
This probably
نعم, but I'm sure.
Because it's 3 years ago.
سبحان
So
الله.
it's the same.
We have a lot of Jamaica.
سبحان الله.
Yeah, it was in the northern part of Sweden. It was 21 to 22 hours.
سبحان الله. يعني so they have 2 hours, 2.5 hours to eat, drink and do everything else. I'm British. Tarawih is out the window. I don't know how they're going to fit Taraweeh. So, a lot of the time we'll find it's a matter of psychology. We think, no, that's just too much. If we go in with the mindset of thinking it's too much, then 12 hours is too much. Because we're not used to that. But if you're used to fasting for 20 hours, and then someone says to you, you're going to have to fast for 12 hours, mashallah, piece of cake. And so, that's why these brothers in Sweden, Finland, and so on, most of them are fasting. We haven't heard any news stories of people who have died in Sweden because of fasting, or people who have collapsed because of fasting, etc. So the rules remain the same. If an individual finds it too much, we're not going to oblige people to fast when it's too much, and Allah has given them a concession to break their fast. And Allah says, يُرِيدُ اللَّهُ بِكُمُ الْيُسْرَ. Allah wants ease for you. He doesn't want hardship for you. He doesn't want you to harm yourself, or kill yourself, or overburden yourself. But do we need to change the rules of Islam just for the sake of a bit of ease? Ease is there. Ease is there.
Yeah, so that's when
so they fast. If there's a concept of Fajr and Maghrib, they continue fasting even if it's 21 hours or 22 hours. Sometimes, and I don't know if you've experienced this, in some countries there might not be any night for a period of time during the year. There's no night. It's just day. In Sweden this happens? No night at all. Okay. Subhanallah. Yeah. So if this happens, as he said, in midsummer, or maybe in other countries it goes on maybe for a few days. If this occurs, that's when we resort to estimating. That's when we resort to estimating. We don't say to someone, fast for the whole week, because the night is coming next week. Maghrib is next week. No, because then that means that we're not praying either. If we say Maghrib is next week, that means we don't have to pray any prayers till next week. That's the next prayer. So then we say no, because the prayers are in the day and night. The Prophet ﷺ says, خَمْسُ صَلَوَاتٍ فِي الْيَوْمِ وَاللَّيْلِ 24 hours, you fit in 5 prayers. If there's no night at all, that's when we resort to estimating. You estimate either to the nearest country or the average times of when you do have Fajr and Maghrib. That's a discussion that the scholars have. But the point is, now you resort to estimating because there's no night. If there's Fajr and there's night, then we go as per the verse. طيب. We spoke about relations during the night of fasting. What if a person has relations during the day of fasting? So during the day, whilst they're fasting, a person has relations with their spouse. A man came to the Prophet ﷺ and said, "O Messenger of Allah, I am ruined, I am destroyed. Halakt." قال وما أهلكك? Said, what is it that has destroyed you? And he explained to him, he said, I had relations with my wife whilst fasting. So the Messenger ﷺ said, do you have a slave that you can free? And the one who does this action has to repeat that day and free a slave. Now that's not really applicable. And if it does ever become applicable, then the ruling would apply. But now it's not applicable, generally speaking, as far as I'm aware. Then the Messenger ﷺ said to him, "Can you fast 2 consecutive months?" The man said, I don't have any slaves. I don't have that much money. He was a poor man. So he said to him, "Can you fast 2 consecutive months?" He said, "No, I can't fast 2 consecutive months." He said, "Can you feed 60 poor people?" He said, I can't feed one person. I can't feed 60 poor people. So the Messenger ﷺ had some sadaqah given to him, or zakah. So he gave it to this person. He gave some dates, amount of food, gave it to this person, and said, "Go and feed this. Go and feed this to 60 poor people." He said, "Feed it to people who are poorer than me." He said, "No one between these 2 mountains is poorer than me." So the Prophet ﷺ smiled and said, "Feed it to your family. Take it, feed it to yourself and your family." So we touched upon this in the first lesson, when we said that hardship is decided by who? Who decide? The individual. Fasting is too hard, or you're ill. You decide that. You decide. Your ability to fast, you decide. The Prophet ﷺ didn't tell him, yeah, you can't fast 60 days. Or he didn't question him even. He didn't say, why can't you fast 60 days? What's your excuse? He didn't say that you've just been fasting now, so obviously you can fast, so fast 60 days. No. Left it to the person. And as I mentioned in one hadith, he said, reported by Ibn Khuzaymah and others, he said, it's fasting that got me into this in the first place. Fasting is what made me do this and now I'm in trouble. You want me to fast 60 days as well? Get myself into more trouble? So the Prophet ﷺ, and he allowed him to take this and feed his own family. So he was let off and he was given that as a concession.
Does he continue fasting after the action to the end of the day? Or
No.
So he doesn't break it?
Absolutely not. If somebody has relations or intentionally breaks their fast during Ramadan, they have to continue fasting that day. No, they have to continue fasting that day. So they continue fasting that day and they repeat the fast. Person can't say, I've broken my fast now, so what's the point? The point is that it's Ramadan and fasting is compulsory. And so fasting needs to be kept for the rest of the day, and then you repeat that one day. You repeat that one day. If it is due to intercourse that a person has broken their fast, then it requires repeating that day, and it also requires fasting 60 consecutive days, or 2 consecutive months.
Sheikh, just a quick
No,
question.
sorry.
If you have fasting left over from let's say 5 years ago, and you haven't made it up, do you have to do the 5 days only? And if you can't fast, he has the excuse of not fasting.
You missed fasts.
You missed fast 5 years ago.
5 for how many days?
And this Ramadan, he cannot fast for medical reasons. Does he have to? Obviously, he has to feed for the whole month.
Of that Ramadan.
Of the current Ramadan.
The current Ramadan.
Vacation.
No.
So which is a good blessing every day,
No.
every single day of fasting. What about the 5 days before? Do they multiply for the 5 years, or does it have to be just?
There's no multiplier. This is why Imam Bukhari rahimahullah ta'ala, when commenting on this verse, in which Allah Ta'ala says, فَمَنْ كَانَ مِنْكُمْ مَرِيضًا أَوْ عَلَى سَفَرٍ فَعِدَّةٌ مِنْ أَيَّامٍ أُخَرَ. Then a similar number of other days. So if you missed 5 days 20 years ago, and today you decide to make them up, then you have to make up 5 fasts. That's it. There's no multiplying of fasts or adding extra fasts, etc. You can add extra recommended fasts as a type of seeking forgiveness for delaying making up fasts for so many years, which is not something that's correct, of course. But it's not compulsory to fast any more than 5. But the problem is, this person now, you're saying is ill. If he's only temporarily ill, then that's fine. He waits and makes up his fasts. He makes up the 5 and makes up Ramadan. Now, even the whole month. So this individual now, who for the month of Ramadan, maybe he's had an operation. He's on medication, temporary medication. And he knows it's temporary. Okay, and the doctors tell him it's temporary medication. And this medication lasts for the whole month. We say, no problem, break your fast for the whole month. But after Ramadan, you make up those fasts.
So what happens if you can't fast throughout the whole year? Does he have to feed a person every day during Ramadan?
No, doesn't have to feed anything. Feeding is called the fidya. Okay? There is no combining between feeding and paying a sort of fidya. Either this or that. If you're supposed to fast, then there's no fidya. If you're supposed to give fidya, then there's no fasting. That's the general rule. Some scholars combine as a type of, I guess, for the one who is negligent in making up their fast, they say he should fast and also feed. But a number of scholars, most scholars in fact, consider that if you have broken your fasts, you have to make it up after Ramadan. If you're unable to make them up after Ramadan because you're expecting your illness to be an ongoing thing, Now we say feed 35 people. 30 people, 34 people for the month of Ramadan, and then 5 for those extra days, because now you can't fast. But if you're expecting to be able to fast very soon, then we say, even if after a year, you're expecting after 1 year, you can fast again. We say, no problem, wait for a year. After the year is over, you're capable of fasting, then you can make up those missed days. Because Allah Ta'ala said, فَعِدَّةٌ مِنْ أَيَّامٍ, fast other days. So therefore there's no other alternative. If it's a long-term thing, now we say, feed. طيب. Allah Ta'ala then after this, and we're almost finished with the verse, He says, وَلَا تُبَاشِرُوهُنَّ وَأَنْتُمْ عَاكِفُونَ فِي الْمَسَاجِدِ. And do not make contact with your wives whilst you are performing i'tikaf in the masajid. The rules of i'tikaf are a bit stricter. Now, when it comes to fondling or foreplay or these things, they shouldn't be done at all when it comes to being in the masjid and performing i'tikaf. I'tikaf means what? It means being in seclusion, keeping yourself in the masjid for a period of time, usually done in the last 10 days of Ramadan, and it can be done any time. Okay? It can be done any time. Pay attention to that. So, a person wants to do it in the first 10 days of Ramadan, there's no problem. A person wants to make i'tikaf in the middle 10, no problem. A person wants to make i'tikaf for 1 day, no problem. Yeah? A person wants to make i'tikaf every night, but they can't do it during the day because they're working or they're studying. Say, no problem. Go to work, and then when you come in, after work, you come into the masjid and stay in the masjid all night till you have to go back to work again. You can do that. It's a flexible thing, because it's a voluntary act of worship. And whenever we have a voluntary act of worship, and this is a principle, voluntary acts of worship are always given flexibility. There's ease. You can't do this, do that. Can't do this, do that. Yeah? So, i'tikaf is like that. And you should intend i'tikaf. If you're in the masjid for a long period of time, you should intend to be, I'm going to be in the masjid from maybe Maghrib until Fajr, with the intention of staying in the masjid and worshipping Allah and doing all sorts of other things. Yeah.
Is there a limit to how long you can?
There's no limit. There's no limit. According to the Hanbalis and the Shafi'is, there's no limit at all. Some scholars say it should be at least 1 day and night, 24 hours. And others say it should be 12 hours at least. Because it's reported that Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu said, O Messenger of Allah, I made a vow in Jahiliyyah, before I became Muslim. I made a vow to make i'tikaf. To make i'tikaf for 1 day. So he said, Awfi bi nadrik. He said, keep to your vow, then do it. So that shows that he made i'tikaf for 1 day, or part of a day. So because of that, Imam Ahmad and others consider that i'tikaf can be for any period of time. But it should be a reasonable period of time. It should be a reasonable period of time, not walk into the masjid, pick something up and walk out and intend i'tikaf, because that's not how i'tikaf was legislated to be. Yeah? Some scholars do even allow that, but it's meaningless. It doesn't mean much. Yeah? Walk into the masjid 2 minutes, I intend i'tikaf in 2 minutes. Well, just about, get your thoughts together in 2 minutes. The person's going to perform the act of i'tikaf. So if it's a reasonable amount of time, Maghrib to Fajr, Maghrib to Taraweeh, something like that, so no problem. Even Maghrib to Isha, no problem. Even Maghrib to Isha. So that's i'tikaf. That's the case of i'tikaf. I'tikaf is a time of seclusion, meaning it's a time to keep away from people. We need that. We human beings are people who can't live without others, which is fine. But at the same time, too much mixing with others can drive us crazy. And so sometimes we also need some time alone and some time to keep away. And the Prophet ﷺ, when he performed i'tikaf, he would have himself a little section in the masjid and he would stay there and worship Allah Ta'ala in that place. No, i'tikaf is not a time to socialize. No problem, sometimes you have a chat with someone, sometimes you get to know a person. These are things that are normal, but it's not there to socialize. Not there to socialize. Let alone performing i'tikaf to commit sin. Like to steal. And that's something I witnessed with my own eyes. People come into i'tikaf with the intention of taking people's stuff. What goes through such a person's mind is beyond my head. This is a time of i'tikaf. This is a month of mercy, Allah's forgiveness. Come into i'tikaf to rob somebody's phone, or to steal somebody's wallet, or to... I'm not saying that's a common thing, but it's something that happens. Yeah, things that happen. Obviously this person has their priorities completely wrong, if this is how they think of worship. So that's i'tikaf. As reported in the Sahihain, Bukhari and Muslim, the Prophet ﷺ made i'tikaf, and his wives made i'tikaf after him. His wives made i'tikaf after him. So i'tikaf is not just for men. We had a discussion in the last lesson and the lesson before, whether it's women should attend the masjid or to pray prayer, or whether it's better for them to pray at home. The wives of the Prophet performed i'tikaf in the masjid. Not just salah, not just one prayer or two prayers. Performed i'tikaf. They spent 10 nights and days in the masjid. Yeah? And so this is why, as we mentioned, this applies to both men and women. Attending, praying Taraweeh in the masjid, praying, performing i'tikaf, it applies to both men and women. Even though, when Allah addresses the wives of the Prophet ﷺ in the Quran, He says, وَقَرْنَ فِي بُيُوتِكُنْ وَلَا تَبَرَّجْنَ تَبَرُّجَ الْجَاهِلِيَّةِ الْأُولَى, and remain tranquil in your homes. Hold on to tranquility in your homes. That's one tafsir, and it's the majority tafsir. And some scholars say just remain. وَقَرْنَ, stay in your homes. وَلَا تَبَرَّجْنَ تَبَرُّجَ الْجَاهِلِيَّةِ الْأُولَى. Even then, they performed i'tikaf. Which indicates again, as we mentioned, that attending the masjid is something that is for every person. But it goes back to, again, benefits and harms. Yeah, if attending the masjid or making i'tikaf is going to be harmful, then don't perform i'tikaf, because Islam doesn't tell us do good things even if it's at the cost of things that are more important. Islam doesn't teach us to think that way. Yeah, Islam teaches us to prioritize.
Can you bring the kids and come to the masjid?
That's problematic. It's problematic. It's not problematic from an Islamic perspective, because the rule is that i'tikaf is an act of worship, so a child can also perform i'tikaf. But if you know that your child is disruptive, or you know that your child is somebody who is going to disturb other people from their worship, then really they shouldn't be brought. They shouldn't. If, however, you're confident that your child is going to focus, or he's not going to disturb people and so on, there's no harm. There's no harm bringing them to the masjid to perform i'tikaf. And children attended the masjid at the time of the Prophet ﷺ. That happened, but without disruption. Anything which harms other people isn't allowed. Because the Prophet ﷺ said, whoever eats garlic shouldn't attend the masjid. Why? Because the smell of that food isn't pleasant. And the same ruling applies to the one who smokes. If you've just had a cigarette, don't walk into the masjid and join the congregation, because now you're going to be harming other people. And so if that's the harm that lasts only 5-10 minutes during the prayer, and it's a harm of an unpleasant smell, then what about somebody who's disturbing the whole jama'ah for 10 days?
Some people, some nations, garlic, and this is their food. So the whole masjid will eat the same food that they eat.
So everyone's used to it. No one's suffering.
What happened to this a lot?
If in somebody's culture it's common to eat garlic or other foods which have a smell that's not so... It's not just garlic, by the way, it's lots of other foods that sometimes have a very strong smell and aren't so pleasant during the masjid. If you know that that's the case, and we should be conscious of ourselves, we shouldn't attend. Don't attend the masjid. Don't pray in the masjid. Naam, the Prophet ﷺ said, فَلَا يَشْهَدَنَّ مَنْ أَكَلَ من هاتين الشجرتين الخبيثتين فلا يقربن مسجدا. Let him not come near our masjid. Let him not come near our masjid. And the hadith is in the Sahih. So, it's not like the Prophet is telling you not to attend. It's not like you're sinful or doing something that's wrong. So don't attend, because harming people is worse than missing a prayer in the masjid. Even if it's in people's culture. Even if it's in people's culture, regardless of what your culture is, I don't know of a culture that likes smells that are not nice. Even if it's part of people's culture to eat a certain food which has a strong smell, even then, a person should either be sure to get rid of those smells, by doing whatever it is, cleaning their teeth, perfuming themselves and so on, or to just not attend at all in the first place. And that's something really important. And it applies as a general rule. Don't restrict it to garlic. You think, oh, mashallah, I learned a hadith about garlic. It's not about that. It's about a general principle. It teaches us a general rule which tells us, do not harm other believers in any way. If that means squeezing into a tiny little gap of 5 centimeters to try and be in the first row of the congregation, that's a type of harm. And the person shouldn't do that. And this hadith applies across the board.
If someone is experiencing a lot of negative thoughts and they fear they may give someone else nazar, then should they stay away from masjid as well?
It goes back to whether this feeling, and the question is if somebody has negative thoughts about another person, should they keep away in order to not harm them with ayn, evil eye, etc. It goes back to whether you think that's a plausible possibility. If you think genuinely that could happen, then yes, avoid being around that person as much as you can, until you feel that that sort of feeling or thought or intention is no longer there. The same thing applies. It applies across the board, as we said. Fadal Sheikh, how long do we have? Tayyib, can we give it 2 or 3 minutes? Yeah.
Somebody makes a cough.
Yeah.
And they have a problem, family matter, or any problem. So what's the rule for that?
They perform i'tikaf?
They need to leave, I think, is what it's trying to say.
Sorry?
Can they make a cough? If somebody had a problem,
Yeah.
that families,
Yeah. So they want to leave.
so what's
For-
the rule for leaving another?
So for 10 days they want to leave to keep away from the trouble.
No, during the
Yeah.
then something happens.
Yeah.
Can you leave his house or whatever?
Ah.
And you have to leave the masjid.
And you have to leave the masjid to go to solve something. Yes, you leave.
Yeah.
No doubt, yes. Okay. No. You don't have to pay Sheikh Saad anything. You leave for free. So you leave, yes, because i'tikaf is a sunnah, recommended. It's not compulsory. So you can break it at any time. Anytime you want to leave for a need or a reason, you leave and then you return after that. Tayyib, we'll end with the final statement. Allah Ta'ala then says, تِلْكَ حُدُودُ اللَّهِ فَلَا تَقْرَبُوهَا. They are the limits of God, so do not go near them. كَذَلِكَ يُبَيِّنُ اللَّهُ آيَاتِهِ لِلنَّاسِ لَعَلَّهُمْ يَتَّقُونَ. And thus Allah shows His signs to people so that they may obtain taqwa, so that they may obtain God consciousness, awareness of God. First verse started off by saying, لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ, so that you may have taqwa. And the last verse of fasting also ends it with taqwa. So the first verse ends with taqwa, and the last verse of these verses of fasting ends with taqwa, again giving us the whole objective of Ramadan. Jazakumullahu khairan. Maybe next week, since we finished the verses, there are still a few masail left that we haven't discussed. We need to discuss other things that maybe invalidate various other things. So we'll discuss those maybe for half an hour, and then for another half an hour we'll open up if anyone has any comments or questions, etc.
Is that next week?
Next week.
Next week.
Yeah, next Friday. Inshallah ta'ala. Sisters, do we have any questions or comments? Next week, those of you sisters who are going to attend, particularly sisters, their questions are a priority. So if you want to prepare them beforehand and have them either written down or something, or sent even to the masjid, write them down preferably so they can be here in front of me, and the next lesson inshallah ta'ala will go through. Jazakumullahu khairan, subhanakallah wa bihamdika, ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk, alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. And take a seat at the back where some snacks have been prepared for you. For support.
You did more than
Allah